As a young boy on the beaches of Florida, I dreamed of becoming a marine biologist. Then a politically connected friend of my parents said I could be president. But I knew what happened to some of them, and like Steinbeck's Hazel, I didn't want to be one. So of course I went to a college where presidents are made. You may remember it. And for a brief moment thought I'd become an artist. But freshman year I took the marine biology seminar with Professor Fell and spent lots of time in the Museum of Comparative Zoology. My first encounter with computers led me to dislike them when my punch deck of IBM cards flew across Mass Avenue when I slipped on the ice. Another important mentor at Harvard was E.O. Wilson, who got me interested in island biogeography. Despite being far left of center, due to the politics of the late 60s, I wanted to get away and took a teaching position on Santa Catalina Island, 26 miles, so the song said, across the sea from Los Angeles. The island is 22 miles long by 7.5 miles wide. Avalon was the big city with a whopping 1,500 people back then, but the real attraction was that about 98% of the island was undeveloped and offered a wide range of options for me to develop a unique science program using the island as a natural laboratory. One did have to be careful driving the interior roads, though. Catalina is supposed to be the island of romance, but I'm still single after 52 years of looking for a mate of my own species. The Catalina Island School for Boys was located in a remote canyon 2.5 miles by sea from Avalon. My headmaster was a Yaley, but he gave me plenty of freedom to develop the science curriculum. We were on a biological island for both terrestrial and marine critters, and I began looking at ways that marine life might have arrived here. Many fish could swim across the channel, but invertebrates would have trouble crossing the 3,500-foot-deep ocean floor. However, many species had larvae that could drift with the currents and arrive here, so we studied them. Sedentary reef-dwelling fish could also arrive via the plankton. One of the stunning features of SoCal nearshore habitats is the giant kelp, which can grow up to 2 feet a day and reach lengths of 200 feet, rising up to the surface. It consists of a root-like holdfast to secure it to the rocks, and stem-like stipes with leaf-like blades. When winter storms hit, some kelp holdfasts are dislodged and may drift out to sea, carrying payloads of marine invertebrates. I wanted to get my students involved in real scientific research. Dr. Fell suggested we work with him on an NSF-funded research project investigating kelp rafts. I decided to use our school boat to go out, retrieve them, and bring them back to my lab to identify any critters on them. We also used seaplanes to track them as we crossed the channel to Los Angeles. Our classmate Al Gore had not invented the internet, so snail mail was used. We typed up data sheets on what we found on each raft and sent them to him. It led to one of my first scientific publications. In the mid-70s, I was hired by Jean-Michel Cousteau to be part of his Project Ocean Search staff in summer. Now, when I arrived on the island, I bought the biggest, baddest dive knife to ward off great whites. Jean-Michel knew I stopped diving when I saw the movie Jaws, filmed in part 2 miles from my lab. He saw me suiting up 3 years later and asked what got me back in the water. I said I had recently seen Jaws 2. Then in the 1980s, I worked on a 2-hour Turner Broadcasting documentary about the Channel Islands, sailing on board the Cousteau's windship Alcyon. During the filming, Jean-Michel asked me to use a Sony video camera when we released several bald eagles. A light went off. Video wasn't just for family gatherings, but could be used to document natural history. During this period, I served as a consultant to the Wrigley family's Santa Catalina Island Company, monitoring their tours and writing a number of tour manuals. The boat crew started calling me Dr. Bill, so I decided I had to earn that title by heading to UCSB to earn my doctorate. I had hoped to use all my kelp rafting research so I could finish the PhD quickly, but advisor Mike Neuschel suggested I should try something more sexy. Initially, I became interested in using satellites to map kelp beds, as they are detectable in the near-infrared bands. I developed a series of kelp maps from various dates and composited them to create a kelp persistence map, which could then be analyzed relative to various data layers in a geographic information system. This research led to a publication that marine scientists listed in a letter to NOAA's administrator, Dr. Jane Lubchenco, as one of the top 10 papers on marine reserve design, and was used in identifying such reserves around Catalina. When one of my advisors developed cancer, I was asked to teach her classes in satellite remote sensing for 2 years. Afterward, I returned to the island and spent much of my time diving, both in our local dive park and as the marine biologist aboard local dive boats. I ended up doing a lot of deep diving to 200 feet on air to film. As a starving marine biologist, I like to get my money's worth and became known for my many well-worn wetsuits. I began writing a weekly column in our local paper. The website Scuba Board gave me my own forum, and I also published them there, as well as on my own website, starthrower.org. Today, the 900 columns are being organized into a 13-volume ebook set for sale at a future date. I also write occasional articles in dive-related publications, such as on a highly invasive Japanese seaweed, new species sighted off Catalina due to ocean warming, and I continue to author or co-author scientific papers. Then, in 2001, I took a 3-month backpacking and scuba diving trip around the Pacific Ocean. While in Thailand, Patrick from Sweden introduced me to a video housing I could afford. While diving the Great Barrier Reef, I decided I had to film as I watched a sea turtle chomping down on algae 2 feet from me. When I returned to the island, I bought the housing and eventually created 2 cable TV programs. The first, Dive Dry with Dr. Bill, featured highlights from each week's dives. The second show, Munching and Mating in the Macrocystis, was far better and featured 48 episodes about SoCal marine life. These were grouped by subject. Hey, get out of the way! And produced as DVDs for purchase. I also gave many talks to dive clubs and environmental groups and held movie nights. In 1998, working with a friend who was a member of the Wrigley family, we got Jean-Michel a location to hold his summer family camp. I'd visit each year and dive with Jean-Michel, an old friend Dick Murphy on the far left, who was vice president of the Cousteau Society. My efforts eventually attracted broader attention. In this article in Dive Alert magazine, I was called Dr. Kelp and referred to as the poorest Harvard graduate since Thoreau. In 2011, I was honored with the California Scuba Service Award. A few years later, I was given the Golden Flipper Award. While battling 5 cancers, I received the prestigious Poseidon Award from International Reef Check. Jean-Michel and Dr. Sylvia Earle were previous recipients. Then just this year, I received the National Association of Underwater Instructors Environmental Enrichment Award. So that's the story of how I became a big fish in a little pond.